Have you noticed lately that people have been talking about cancel culture? And even though they've been talking about cancel culture, they've been talking it up, as it were. It's nowhere to be seen these days. So take Mr. Beast for an example. He was supposed to have been cancelled for all the accusations against him. And yet, he continues to pull 100 million views, 100 million view videos. And all he has to do is ignore the cancellation. And the reason why this is possible is because you cannot really get cancelled on social media as long as you don't break terms of service. You can actually do anything anytime, and you will not be cancelled. And so Mr. Beast is able to continue doing what he does, even despite the fact that he's supposed to have been cancelled. And I think that contributes to a broader point about how everybody has been unshackled from traditional rules of engagement. That nowadays you can pretty much do anything you like, almost anything, and it will not be seen as a big deal, right? So if I took off my sweater and my t-shirt 50 years ago, if I had done that, it would have been a big deal. Look at this guy embarrassing himself. But if I did it today, it would be like nothing, you know. It's like I don't even know how it's possible to bully people anymore, because if you get bullied, all you have to do is turn the bullying into a joke, and it will be accepted, right? We no longer live in an age where people have much self-respect or dignity. All of those things seem quaint and outdated to people. And so you can use it to your advantage, and you can offload a little bit of your social anxiety, if you have any, by just going along with the joke. Like if you go on YouTube, nobody really talks about what you look like unless they find you attractive. Nobody really cares what you look like. You can still be famous even if you don't look very nice. People don't really mention your appearance in the same way that they would have 50 years ago. It's like they would have been like, why aren't you wearing a suit? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you cutting your beard? Why aren't you cutting your hair? These rules are quaint. They are dated. They don't really mean anything anymore. So we live in an age of almost absolute freedom. And it is something that has upsides and downsides. The downside is that because people can get away with almost anything, you kind of live in what you might call a kind of degenerate society. It's hardly constrained by rules. Although there are still rules, you can backdoor most of them. You can escape them in some way or another. So it seems to me that this idea of cancellation doesn't apply much on the internet anymore. People are too online. And so I've even heard people say chat at the end of the sentence, even if they're not talking to the chat. And so it's a kind of degenerate society where pretty much anything goes, and nothing, no matter what you do, no matter what you look like, it's not going to be a big deal to people. Like one reason why there couldn't be freak shows anymore is because everybody's a freak, or almost everybody's a freak, and it just would not be a big deal anymore. It's not just a matter of sensitivity, it's also a matter of the constraints being loose. But the upside of that is that I think, it occurred to me that if I had been in school today, instead of the 2000s, early 2010s, I maybe would have not gotten bullied, because the differences that I do have are hardly relevant anymore, and I could have countered the bullying by simply turning it into a joke and uploading my antics to YouTube, and say to people, "Oh, well, I'm a YouTuber. Of course, I'm goofy," and they will just accept. It's no longer embarrassing to have a YouTube channel. It's no longer embarrassing to post pictures of yourself or post videos of yourself, desecrating yourself, making fun of yourself. You can't seriously bully people for it because it's so prevalent, you know. Now, that's not to say there is no longer bullying and people are no longer bullied for their appearance or their characteristics, but I'm just saying that it seems to be a lot easier to get away with a lot more. It's a lot easier to turn the shit that you've been given into gold, right? You're given an orange and you can squeeze it, or lemon. Maybe the expression, if life gives you a lemon, you squeeze it, has never been more apt than today. You really can't just be given anything. Your autistic traits, if you have any, maybe a disfigurement, your fatness, it can all be turned into a joke in a way that people back in the day would not have had the taste to accept, right? They would have seen you as a freak, and increasingly they no longer do, and it's just kind of funny. Like, one person that pops into my head when I think about this is I think he's called Gabriel Ignatius, something like that. I'm probably not getting it right. Fluffy, and he's like probably like 450 pounds, or used to be, but he's just fluffy. He's no longer fat. The fatness is not really relevant anymore. It just doesn't really matter anymore. You can't bully people the same way you used to be able to. Like, if you point to somebody and you say you're fatty, it almost seems to like mean absolutely nothing anymore. When decades ago it would have been almost a death sentence, right? Today it just doesn't matter, and part of it is because people are more sensitive with regard to what you can say and what you cannot say. But it's also just a kind of degeneration from one point of view, or if you don't want to call it degeneration, then an opening from the other point of view towards a more open life, a more open society. And so I think the most honest response is that this new opening has good sides and bad sides, and people who just claim it only has one side and not the other are lying. They have an agenda, which is fine, but it's just not true. So I think the most honest response is to just say, okay, it has bad points and good points, and I think for me it's pretty much all good, because I've never been someone who was able to comply with society and its demands. So for me, I welcome the change. It's going to help me to succeed, and it's going to help many other people who are a little off or strange or divergent to succeed. And I'm not claiming that all those problems that go along with that are going to go away. I'm not saying that people are not discriminated against or anything of that sort for being different. Autistic people will still be outcast as autistic, but I think less and less so. I think if you take an autistic person and put them to somebody who's young, the reaction will be a lot warmer than it would be otherwise. They're just a lot more receptive to people who are a little bit different. So I think that's a good thing, and it's a piece of advice that you can take up if you want to succeed in the world. Is that the new meta of the game is difference. It's a kind of quirkiness that everybody can be different and quirky, and that's an opportunity that you can seize and go along with that, to maybe concentrate on your weirdness and try to turn it into a profit. So that's what came to my mind about that. And I mean, I can continue this point of discussion, I think, forever. So maybe I will. That, for example, it used to be the case for centuries and decades after Darwin that genes determine everything, and that people would argue that if you have inherited your parents' genes, then you're just screwed, and there's nothing you could possibly do about that. And this kind of gene-centric view, deterministic gene-centric view, is still espoused by people like incels and black pillars today. But there's been evidence lately that coming out that the field of epigenetics, the idea the idea that the environment actually has a reflexive response to the genes, and so you're not just a collection of genes or molecules, atoms bouncing around. You're not just a collection of DNA. It's been set in stone, and there's nothing you can do about it. It does seem that the environment can play a role in how in which genes are turned on, which genes get expressed, and so somebody like, I think his name is Dennis Noble, who has he has challenged the view of Richard Dawkins, his view of the selfish gene, that we're just basically just the genes, and the genes that's only care about their self-replication, and there's nothing else, and we just kind of meat puppets, robots. In that game, with just the garment, the cloak, the robot, the hardware to the software, and he has challenged this and has said that no, actually, we do have. We can have intentionality. We can connect with the world, make a connection to the world, and we can change our destiny. So he believes in free will. I don't, but I still think it's possible that I still think it's the way it works, the way our evolution works is a reflexive conversation between our genetics and the environment in which we live. So, as somebody who's autistic, I can give a good example of how this would manifest in the world. For example, it might be that I'm autistic and there's nothing I can do about it. That's just the way it is. But because the environment that I'm put in would change so many things about my personality. My being autistic is really not saying much, right? So the way I think about it is, the scientific facts, like, I don't know, this fact of gravity or a mathematical fact like 2 plus 2 is 4, which are supposed to be always true. I think that they just give us a framework of reality, but they don't really get to the content of a reality. And so it might be that I'm autistic and there's just nothing I could possibly do about it. When you think about it, it actually doesn't say much about how my life will be determined just for my being autistic. It's just not a very informative statement, because if I'm treated the way that I should be treated to maximize my development and to bring out and tease out my potential and my happiness and so on, that will be a really different picture from the one that I actually unfortunately have suffered, which is that it was kept in the hind and suppressed, and I was not treated the way I should have been in light of my condition. And so it might be that I'm autistic, and I just have to say that's a fact. My psychiatrist, my shrink, has a tendency to play this game of, this postmodern kind of game, like, oh, these are just words, they don't really mean much. I have criticized that view, that, because, even if these words are just words and they're made up by society, you still nonetheless have the disease. You still nonetheless have ADHD or OCD or whatever it is that's bothering you. You do nonetheless have it, regardless of what words you attribute to it or not. You're still marred by them. And so I'm not trying to play this game of, well, it's all relative anyway, and words don't really mean anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they don't say they don't say much. Words don't say much. Well, these scientific, psychological, or mathematical words, they don't usually say very much at all. And so you can have 10 autistic people and they can be fairly similar, but they can also be very different. After all, autism is supposed to be a spectrum. Highly functional, less functional, much less functional, And I think the environment has a lot to do with where you end up on that scale. The genes might also have something to do with it. They must. But it's a question of, how the environment can actually supervene on the genes and determine which ones are expressed. And so that's another model. It's an alternative model to the gene determinist point of view, whereby you have certain genes, you're fucked. It just doesn't cover the reality very much, right? Because if you're cast out by society for your troubles, if society could change its ways to be more in line with yours, then your suffering would significantly decrease, and then your autistic traits, to keep using the example, might not manifest nearly as much or at all. I mean, we just think about autistic traits like pacing around, like getting bad anxiety from a social situation, overthinking, that sort of stuff. Being quiet and nonverbal, or sometimes nonverbal. Not being able to talk because you're afraid of the people around you. These might be autistic traits, or they might be attributed and correlated with autism. Nonetheless, if you were in an environment that allowed you to talk without judgment, that didn't stress you out nearly as much as the current one, then those traits would not emerge, or they would emerge they would emerge less, or they would emerge in a more constructive way, where you're able to put those traits of anxiety and pacing around and overthinking into something constructive, where it doesn't just get wasted on anxiety and fear of people, right? And so you can see with this analogy, with this example, that just a pure gene-centered view of the universe doesn't explain much to you. You do need this emergent property of the environment, and this is a very mysterious thing. Nobody really understands what the environment is, and it often gets into it gets people gives people a trump card to pull out some kind of mystical point of view, like religion, that there's a soul that we have inside of us, and that's why we're not just the sum of our parts, right? Because that's the vexing problem for materialism, that even though we're just a bunch of cells and a bunch of organisms, a bunch of atoms, genes turning on, neurons firing, legs walking, fingers moving, all this physical stuff, your eyes widening and closing, and it's very if you've seen a picture of a human skeleton, it's very disgusting. You can see the brain; it just looks like a series of wires and a monster. It seems attractive to say that we're more than that we go beyond that. For example, how could it be that when I drink this stuff, there's this sensation of taste, even though I'm just a collection of cells and I don't really understand where myself is. My tongue sends signals to my brain that says, "Oh, tasty," and it's just impossible to understand how this is possible. The physicalist, the materialist doesn't really have a good answer. But I would say that the response to that, this kind of dualist response or idealist response, that we also have souls, or some other thing that's not physical, that doesn't really explain it either. It doesn't explain why the soul exists. Of course, if you make basic assumptions and you just say, well, it exists because God made it, and, but you can say that of the environment. You can just say, well, it might be that your autistic traits could change, but they're not going to, because society itself is determined by genes, and the genes are selfish, and you just no matter which direction you go, you can end up attacking that side for on the grounds of basic assumptions that society is just made up of individuals who are each selfish, and so this utopia that you imagine is never going to happen, and we need something like a god to tell us what to do. And on the other side you can retort, yeah, but God doesn't really explain why God exists, and it doesn't really explain how we have free will, and so you just go back and forth, just bounding back and forth, playing pong, or whatever that game is called. Yeah, that's it's just it just never really terminates anywhere useful. So I don't really have a solution to that problem. All I wanted to say is that it does seem to me that this kind of genetic determinist reductionist viewpoint that we have, and there's a very good video on this subject on, I think, I don't remember what the channel is called. I should, but if you type into YouTube, you know genetic determinism, something like that. You could probably find the video. It's on the channel that has the name that has the video about certain philosophers like Kant and Spinoza and Hegel. So if you search up those names, you might find it. Maybe it's called Thinking Now. I just don't remember. But it's a British dude. So I think if you type in Spinoza Guide to Life, you find his channel. Anyway, it's a very good video. I don't remember the title or the channel name, but you can find this stuff on YouTube and you can learn about it. I think it's very interesting. It's interesting to challenge our assumptions about what we are, and it's a good way of. I think it's a good way of challenging this kind of bigoted, racist opinions that some people use, like, oh, our race is superior because our genes are superior, and it's just that kind of framework just crumbles when you look at the facts. The environment has a huge and decisive role on what kind of things that we are. And if you say, okay, so if you're born with a fucking head, if you're born with two heads, right? Or if you're born with a low IQ or whatever, but you can't really change that. Like it's just there's no environmental, or if you're ugly, like the incels might say. If you're ugly, if you're 5'6", right? What could you possibly do? You're short. You're going to be short, even with surgery. You're ugly. You're going to be ugly, no matter how much you try. Even if you go under the knife, it's not going to be good enough. You're just so short and so ugly. So what could you possibly do, right? And so, us, the genetic determinists, win in the end. I would say, but aren't you just arbitrarily setting the starting point, like the range of what you're looking at? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why don't you look at, like, it might, but why are you short? Like, you're probably short because your ancestors didn't have sufficient nutrition. I think North Koreans are shorter than South Koreans. Why is that? Well, because one country is really rich, one country is really poor, so they have famine. They just don't have proper nutrition, so they end up shorter, right? So, and I don't know why they're ugly. Like, can't really explain that one. So, maybe there are fundamental things that you really can't change. Like, I don't know how you would modify the environment. I mean, I guess that would come down to surgery and more advanced forms of surgery. And that's the only thing you can do. Or maybe there's something else to it. Like, I don't know, if your ancestors were fitter, like more, in tune with nature, maybe you would have ended up with better, with a better set of teeth, with better muscles. I don't know. It's just that I think if your ancestors had been healthier, you probably would have ended up more attractive just for that alone. And there are only outliers who are ugly no matter what happens. They just cannot do anything about it. Maybe those people exist, but I just find a dissatisfying explanation. This idea that we're just genes and there's nothing, or if there's something we can do, it's not good enough. It's not enough. It seems like pretty much any problem you can come up with, where you say it's the fault of genetics, you can come up with a environmental solution to that will defeat it. Sorry, my phone is dying in here, and maybe that's a good place to end the video, because my phone is gonna die. And we did what we could with the 30 minutes available to us. Alright, so I think even if you concede something like your ancestry is just ugly, it doesn't actually say much about how your ugliness is treated in the world. right? So I don't accept this kind of incel fatalism that, well, we're short and ugly and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I think if society was more accepting of you, I think it wouldn't be that much of a problem. And I think it's just begging the question to say that can happen. I think it's no accident that incel ideology is so rampant today and not 50 years ago. It's rampant today because we live in a kind of a crazy, some might say degenerated culture where everything goes and everybody can fuck 80 people at the same time, and people don't keep relationships all that much, and so the standard from personality has shifted to appearance. So it's not a coincidence. These things are correlated, and so it's very obvious then that one way to attend to this problem, to ameliorate the problem, is to have a more welcoming and stable society where your appearance doesn't count for everything, even if the structure of your face itself cannot be changed, although even that's not true. I mean, today technically you should be able to change even the structure of your face with cosmetic surgery. And so I just think more and more it will be found out that genetic determinism is dead, that the old simplistic way of looking at things is dead, and everything will become more complex and difficult to understand. More and more problems come out, and we just don't really have the answers. We just have to say it's the environment doing it, but we don't really know exactly why or how. It's mysterious, and we're gonna try and do our best. Of course, that's an optimistic reading. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but that would be the ideal way of going about it, is saying, okay, we're learning more and more about the world. We're learning that people can be transgender or whatever, and we're not going to retaliate. We're not going to be mean and rude to people. Because of it, we're going to have a more accepting and open conversation in society. And I'm pessimistic that that's going to happen, but I think that would be the correct way of meeting the death of genetic determinism, the falling away of old structures and constraints, the challenges of the world. It won't happen, but it would be nice if it did.